Hi, friends. Hello, the world. Welcome back to this episode of Tools for Transitioning Humanitarians. I'm your host, Priscilla Monua. And the topic that I want to talk to you today about is what happens when we fail. We transition and then we fail. What happens then? And I think this is one of the reasons why many of us humanitarians don't want to transition, are afraid of transitioning, is we're so afraid of failing and how that could look like. And I think we don't even maybe realize how it actually could look like or like details of failing, but we just stop ourselves from even making decision, going for it, and we just keep spinning in how what we want can't happen. So therefore, I thought that today we could have this conversation around how that could actually look like, how failing can look like, and then how to deal with it in a way that keeps you going to what you want to keep going for. And really having your own conversation with yourself as to how you believe that failing can look like going into that scenario, and then also going into what are you going to do if that happens, and then how are you going to manage so that you give yourself the assurance that you know what to do or how to handle failures. Because here is the short answer to what happens when you fail is you're going to feel disappointment, you're going to feel frustration, you're going to feel a lot of maybe anxiety or a lot of these emotions of, oh my God, what's going on? This is not how I thought it would go, right? These are the feelings you will feel. And those are the exact same feelings probably you're currently feeling in your current humanitarian job, and you might be even, in fact, feeling those very regularly. And interesting that you don't label them as failures, while when you are going for what you want, as soon as something similar happens, we are so quick in labeling that this is failing, this is not going anywhere, it's not working, everything is failed and doomed, and I need to just go back to what I know. And that's the part that we need to really learn how to deal with it. Because as every time, if we just go and um, get scared of the failing and then just go back to what we know, even though that's not what we're wanting, right? Then we just keep being in this space of back and forth and never really committing to getting to what we want to. So that's why let's start with the conversation around what is your failing could look like, and like picturing or imagining for yourself what that could really be and how you would feel in that process, right? And of course, in order for us to label something as a failure, we need to also know what the goal is, because otherwise we can't just keep saying this is not working, this is not working, without really giving ourselves the clear picture of what is it that we wanted it to work and why it's not working, right? So we need to be able to compare what is the failing that we're labeling as failing, and what was the actual direction, destination we wanted to go for, and therefore we failed to go to that direction. So if I take my example of when I decided to transition, right? So the goals that I had were very specific, I would say, and the goals, and I have been talking about this a lot, and I want to do this so that you can see this example of what is the goal and what would have been a failure, and so we can see and compare. So the goal at that time was when I was resigning and wanting to transition, that was 2020. And the goal at the time was that I wanted to do the things that I really believe in and love. I want to do this while living and being with my loved ones, right? With my mom and with my relationship partner. And then replicating my salary. These were the three main goals that I was pursuing, right? Now, as I went to pursue this, and while living on my savings and all of these things, I have seen a lot of my brain would call a failure, right? So failure would be that in the first year as I transitioned, I didn't really replicate the salary that I thought I would. I was very confident that I would do that, but that didn't happen. And I feel I failed dramatically, if you will, right? Now, in that moment, when I failed dramatically, when I was feeling all of this fear of, oh my God, what if this doesn't work? What if I need to get back to the job that I was not really wanting to go back to, right? And I think the more that made this failure more heightened and more scary is that my shame around failure, right? So my shame around failure was that if I go back, everyone's going to look at me and point at me and say that you shouldn't have never left UN. You shouldn't have done this. This is what happens when you leave UN. What were you thinking that would really make you believe that you could make all the things happen outside? And if it was that easy, everyone would be doing it, right? So these were the shames and guilt around failure that I think I was more worried about. Now, the other failure that I think I was very worried about is that I wouldn't be able to sustain and support my family back in Kyrgyzstan, right? So these would be for me the failures, right? The failure for me in that moment when I was transitioning, the failure that looked like is that me not being able to replicate my salary. The failure looked like me not eh, being able to support my family, and the failure of experiencing shame of what if I need to go back, and then how am I going to do that, whether I'm going to do that, and all of that overthinking, shame around worrying about, right? All of this, or fear of how this may not work, and all of this were part of the failure pile, let's say. Now, the part that I didn't fail at all, I would say, and I have been good from the beginning, is the part where I actually love doing what I do, and I continue doing that until today, right? And also living with my loved ones. That was the other goal, and I have been able to do that all of this time, right? So obviously, then, in order to keep doing the things that I love and being with my loved ones, I need to then continue sustaining myself. And that's the part that I think where the failure was the most risky, or the failure was the most where my attention went to, right? Now, in your case, it may be a similar situation that you may, like in your case, the failure could be that you haven't been able to find a way to sustain whatever the thing that you love doing. That could be in your mind a failure, right? Another failure could be maybe for some of us is that we don't really find what exactly is that we really want to do or keep doing long term. That could be a failure that we're not able to find it, or we're not able to make it work, right? So these were the parts of the journey that we might label as failure. Now, for some of us, and I have seen this so much also in my own experience, is that while we're doing what we love doing, and also when things don't go and work the way that we thought it would go, we may also label them as failures, right? So I know, for instance, some of the humanitarians who want to go and search for another job and find something else, and then every time they get the rejection from that application process, they feel a lot of this failure feeling, right? I'm failing, I'm not worth it, or I'm doing something wrong. What am I doing something wrong? And in those moments, it's very easy for us to get into how indulgent, like getting into how we're failing and how we're not doing anything and how we're bad and we should just go back. This pattern becomes so much more present and prevailing. And our goal is always, right, as humanitarians who are transitioning, learning how to deal with them as we continue going for what we want to, right? And that's the part that I really help you and many transitioning humanitarians. That's really the essence of what I help is how can we continue going for what we want while we are feeling all of these emotions, while our brain is freaking out as to how we should just go back to what we know best, even though that's not what we like. And those are the parts that we will need to learn how to deal with. In other words, regulate our emotions in a way that we don't get into panic and then just keep acting from the survival brain of let's just get the saving rope, right? If we were drowning, let's just get the saving ring and then get out of the water instead of learning how to comfortably swim in the water, surf in the water. That's the goal that we're really learning. So that's why if we don't really have the conversation around what is it the failure that could look like for us individually, how that could look like for us individually, and also how our reaction to it is, if we don't really look at them, then we're not going to be able to actually make decisions and move forward and transition, right? So that's what we're really recognizing, and that's what we are really working on currently in my group coaching, where I'm really helping them to go through to, okay, if this failure is looking this way, then what are we going to do? If the failure looks this way, then what are we going to do and how are we going to solve for them? That's the work that we're doing with so many other humanitarians. Now, we looked at first, as I said, we looked at what the failure could look like and how you feel and how your version of that failure could look like, right? And we really need to be able to at least imagine and understand and all of this first. Now, the next phase could be the phase where we are now deciding how we want to react to it in the way that's not usually the panic and let's just go back to safety kind of way, but rather in a mature way of, okay, failure is part of this journey. We have imagine this would happen, and now is the time, and the testing time basically is how are we going to deal with them, right? What are we going to do with them, and what are the ways that we can deal with them that feels good to us instead of just running away from those failures. And that's the thing that I think many of us are afraid of dealing with it because we just believe we don't know how to do that. But that's so not true, though, if you think about it, because in our humanitarian journey, we have failed so many times, except that we probably never really labeled it as failure, right? Because we have experienced a lot of the disappointment, a lot of the frustration. Maybe, yes, we have assigned the blame to other people, the systems, but still we were part of them. And we had the projects in mind, we had the delivery planned, we had the projects that were not implemented on time, and all of this. Yes, and it was a collective endeavor, and maybe that's why it didn't feel failure in the strongest way that we would have otherwise. But still, we recognize that we have failed a lot of the times in the past, and also we know that we have come through and overcome through that, right? And we need to recognize essentially why we have come through and overcome all of those failures in our job place, how we have done it so often, so many times, and how we can maybe at least draw the lessons of being the person who knows how to go through and overcome failures, right? Because if we just keep believing that we are someone who can't overcome failure, we're someone who does not know how to overcome failure or how to go through failure, then we're not even going to start something because we are going to fail in advance, right? And I've talked about this so many times in the past is that we tend to, a lot of the times, imagine what the fear or failure could look like in like vaguest terms. We just then imagine how terrifying it would feel to us, and then we wouldn't even go for even trying it, right? We wouldn't even go for trying it. And that shows to me that the reason why we're not even going and trying it is because we are convinced already that whatever we want is not going to work and we're going to feel terrible. Then, therefore, why even try it? And that's very understandable. So that's why our goal is always to not only know what the failures could look like, but also how do we react to them and how do we want to react to them, right? And the more we know how to do that, the more we're able to then create the freedom within us to say, I can do whatever I want to because I know how to deal with whatever the failures that come along the way. And the same goes in the humanitarian sector, is because our desire to work in that sector, to work for that cause, to work in that organization, to work for that career, to work for that money was so strong that we were willing to overcome whatever failures along the way, right? We were willing to overcome, and even if not overcome, just go through the emotions, maybe suppress emotions, maybe we didn't handle well, but we just kept going anyway, right? And now what we can do is, in the transitioning phase, we can learn from the lessons of, okay, maybe we don't want to keep suppressing, and we don't want to keep just numbing it with overworking, or numbing it with shopping, or numbing it with drinking. Maybe that's not what we want to do, because that's exactly the reason why we left the humanitarian sector, right? So what if now we want to learn from those lessons of, okay, if there is a stronger if there is a stronger desire to live the life that we want to do the things that we want to replicate salary the way we want to, if those desires are stronger and they are moving us and driving us towards what we want to, then obviously we will then want to learn how to deal with those failures, right? And whatever our brain labels as failures. And the more we are able to see that how we have actually solved a lot of the failures before, or how we have all gone through the failures before, and we know how to do it, or we want to learn how to do it, and we want to also regulate our emotions along the way, so that we're not just numbing our emotions or keep suppressing whatever is happening, because we want to now transition in the way that we want to live our lives better, more fulfilling, more elements of what we really want, then obviously regulating those emotions, as well as how confident we get in solving or overcoming those failures, becomes such critical skills, right? And once we learn those skills, then the next phase is implementing them and crafting those skills even more and more, so that we keep going and transitioning and growing and thriving, versus keep being in places that we want to, versus keep failing in the places that we actually don't want to be in, but we keep failing and keep feeling all of the suffering without the perspective of something better coming up, and therefore feeling like, what is the point even of suffering, and point of even failing all of this, or point of even going through these failures, if we don't really believe that what we're doing makes sense, if we don't really believe that we're going anywhere that we really want to, right? So therefore it becomes so much more difficult to handle. And if we're wanting to handle failure as we transition, then we need to definitely learn what they could look like, how they could look like, how we would feel in reaction to them. And then how are we going to deal with our own panic, with our own anxiety, with our own pressures, when our brain just says, let's get out of here, let's do something else. In those moments, how do we rely on our trust? How do we rely on our plans? How do we rely on ourselves, essentially, to keep going and to keep overcoming those failures to go to what we want to, right? And that's exactly what I'm wanting to teach you, to coach you on, to get you ready for transitioning, so that you know exactly what those failures could be and how you're going to deal with them in the way that makes you keep going for what you want to, and learning to regulate a lot of the emotions along the way. That's the amazing skills you can gain. So that's why I would love to invite you to my group coaching on big transitioning for humanitarians, where we are diving into all of this and more. And of course, you are welcome to bring any topics that you want to get coaching on, so that you keep on track to getting to your destination that you want to. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful week, everyone, and message me for coaching. Bye.